The shocking truth about training your brain for success. Let me be brutally honest with you. Most people don't fail because they lack talent, intelligence, or opportunity. They fail because they are training their brain to lose every single day without realizing it. And here's the shocking part. Your brain doesn't care about your dreams. It only cares about the patterns you repeat. If you've ever wondered why some people seem to attract success, money, confidence, and opportunities almost effortlessly, while others work harder and get nowhere, this video is for you. Not because of luck, not because of privilege, but because of how the brain is trained. Today I'm going to show you the truth about training your brain for success, without fluff, without clichés, and without motivational nonsense that fades tomorrow morning. This is about rewiring how you think, decide, and act, so success stops feeling forced and starts feeling inevitable. Let's begin. Topic 1. The shocking truth. Your brain is already trained, just not for success. Your brain is already trained. That's the shocking truth most people never stop to face. Not someday, not after you read another book or watch another video. Right now, every single day, your brain is being trained by what you think, what you focus on, what you tolerate, and what you repeat without questioning. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most people are unknowingly training their brain for limitation, not success. Your brain doesn't wake up in the morning asking, "How can I make you rich, confident, and fulfilled today?" It wakes up asking one question only: how can I keep you safe? Safety, to the brain, means familiarity. And familiarity often looks like the same habits, the same doubts, the same routines, the same financial ceiling, the same excuses wrapped in logical explanations. This is why change feels hard, not because you're lazy, not because you're incapable, but because success threatens familiarity. Every time you scroll instead of thinking, every time you delay a difficult decision, every time you say, "This is just how things are," instead of, "How could this be different?" your brain reinforces a pathway. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, but let's strip away the scientific language and say it plainly. Your brain becomes what you repeatedly rehearse. That internal voice you hear every day, the one that questions whether it's worth trying, whether it's realistic, whether you're good enough, that voice didn't appear by accident. It was trained. And here's where most people misunderstand success. They think successful people are more confident, more motivated, more disciplined by nature. But confidence is not a personality trait. Motivation is not a permanent state. Discipline is not genetic. They are trained responses. Look at how children learn. Repetition, emotion, reinforcement. The adult brain works the same way. It just hides it better. If you repeatedly associate money with stress, struggle, guilt, or fear, your brain will avoid growth opportunities to protect you emotionally. If you repeatedly associate success with pressure, responsibility, or judgment, your brain will sabotage momentum right when things start working. If you repeatedly associate comfort with safety, your brain will choose short-term relief over long-term freedom every time. This is why people say they want success, but their actions quietly vote against it. Now think about someone like Warren Buffett. People admire his patience, his discipline, his long-term thinking. But those qualities didn't appear magically. He trained his brain from a young age to think in probabilities instead of emotions. While others reacted to fear and excitement, he trained himself to stay neutral. While others chased quick wins, he trained his brain to delay gratification. Over decades, those neural patterns compounded into extraordinary results. Same brain, different training. Or take Oprah Winfrey. Her story is often framed as inspiration, but what truly transformed her life was not optimism. It was mental reframing. She trained her brain to interpret adversity as meaning, not punishment. She trained herself to ask empowering questions instead of repeating victim narratives. Over time, her identity shifted, and when identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. This is what most people miss. Your identity is not who you are. It's who your brain believes you are, and your brain builds that belief from repetition. If you repeatedly see yourself as someone who tries but never quite gets there, your brain will protect that identity. If you repeatedly see yourself as not a money person, your brain will avoid financial responsibility. If you repeatedly see yourself as lucky just to get by, your brain will reject abundance as unsafe. This is not self-sabotage, it's self-protection. Your brain is loyal, not intelligent. It serves the patterns you install, and this is why positive thinking alone doesn't work. You can repeat affirmations all day, but if your daily behavior, emotional reactions, and internal dialogue contradict them, your brain will follow the strongest signal. Repetition beats intention every time. Here's the part that usually creates silence when people hear it. Your current results are not random. They are evidence of your mental training. Your income level, your confidence in conversations, your tolerance for stress, your relationship with opportunity. These are all outputs of how your brain has been conditioned to respond to life. And this should not make you feel guilty. It should make you feel powerful. Because if your brain learned these patterns, it can unlearn them. But first, you must stop pretending that success is about information. You already know enough. The problem is not knowledge. The problem is conditioning. Until you consciously retrain your brain, every new strategy will be filtered through old programming. You'll start strong, then slow down. You'll feel inspired, then retreat. You'll see opportunities, then talk yourself out of them with perfectly reasonable explanations. Your brain will say it's being realistic. In reality, it's defending the familiar. Training your brain for success means disrupting these patterns deliberately. It means feeling uncomfortable without escaping. It means questioning thoughts that feel true but keep you small. It means acting before you feel ready, not recklessly, but intentionally. And once you understand this, something changes. You stop blaming circumstances. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop hoping for clarity before action. You realize success is not a breakthrough moment. It's a retraining process. In the next part, we're going to expose the most dangerous form of mental training people engage in daily, the one that quietly destroys confidence, momentum, and financial growth while pretending to be logical and responsible. Once you recognize it, you'll understand why so many intelligent, capable people stay stuck for years and how to step out of that cycle for good. Topic 2. Why being realistic is quietly destroying your success. There is a form of mental training so dangerous, so subtle, that most people mistake it for intelligence, maturity, or responsibility. And because it sounds reasonable, it quietly destroys momentum, confidence, and financial growth without ever triggering alarm bells. That form of training is called over-identification with being realistic. At first glance, it feels like wisdom. It sounds like common sense. But underneath, it is one of the most powerful ways the brain is conditioned to stay small. Being realistic, in the way most people use it, is not about seeing clearly. It's about seeing safely. Your brain loves realism because realism protects it from disappointment. If you don't expect much, you can't be let down. If you don't try too hard, failure won't hurt as much. If you keep your dreams reasonable, your identity remains intact. So the brain learns a dangerous habit. It labels fear as logic. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind can produce a rational explanation for not acting? The timing isn't right. The market is bad. Other people have more advantages. I should wait until I feel more confident. I need more information. I'll start when things calm down. Each one sounds responsible. Each one feels adult. And each one quietly reinforces a neural pathway that says, staying where I am is safer than moving forward. Over time, your brain learns that hesitation equals intelligence and action equals risk. This is why so many highly educated, capable people struggle to build wealth, influence, or momentum. Their brains are exceptionally good at explaining why not to move. Look at how this plays out financially. Someone sees an opportunity to learn a new skill, invest in growth, or start something meaningful. Immediately, the brain scans for danger. What if it doesn't work? What if I lose money? What if people judge me? What if I waste time? Instead of asking better questions, the brain concludes, it's more realistic to wait. And waiting feels productive because it avoids discomfort. But nothing changes. Meanwhile, people who succeed are not reckless. They are not blind optimists. They simply train their brains differently. They learn to distinguish between real risk and emotional discomfort. Take Elon Musk, for example. His early decisions with Tesla and SpaceX were labeled unrealistic, irresponsible, even foolish. By most people's standards, risking his PayPal fortune on industries known for failure made no sense. But his brain was trained to ask a different question. Not, what if this fails? But, What is the long-term impact if this works? That mental framing changes everything. Or consider Jeff Bezos. When he left a stable job to start Amazon, he didn't do it because he was certain of success. He did it because he trained his brain to regret inaction more than failure. He famously called it a regret minimization framework, but at its core, it was mental conditioning. He trained his brain to tolerate uncertainty in service of vision. Most people do the opposite. They train their brain to avoid uncertainty at all costs. And here's the brutal truth. Avoiding uncertainty guarantees mediocrity. The brain that is addicted to realism will always choose what feels justified today over what creates freedom tomorrow. It will protect your current lifestyle, even if that lifestyle quietly drains your potential. This is why motivation fades. Motivation asks you to act despite discomfort. Realism whispers that discomfort is a sign you shouldn't proceed, and the brain believes it. Over time, this creates a deeply ingrained identity. You become the practical one, the stable one, the responsible one. And those labels feel good. They earn approval. They reduce anxiety. But they also create invisible ceilings, because growth requires you to look unreasonable before you look successful. Your brain hates that phase. It hates ambiguity. It hates being misunderstood. It hates the feeling of not knowing. So it trains itself to stay within the borders of what has already been proven. And here's where this becomes truly dangerous. The brain begins to confuse emotional safety with truth. Just because a thought feels calm doesn't mean it's accurate. Just because a decision reduces anxiety doesn't mean it's aligned with your future. Many people stay stuck not because they lack courage, but because their brain has been rewarded for caution for too long. Think about how often society praises playing it safe. Get a secure job. Don't take unnecessary risks. Be grateful for what you have. All of that sounds healthy, and in moderation, it is. But when your brain internalizes safety as the highest value, it will sabotage ambition silently. You'll tell yourself you're being patient. You'll tell yourself you're being strategic. You'll tell yourself you're being realistic. Meanwhile, years pass. This is why training your brain for success requires redefining realism. True realism is not assuming the worst. True realism is understanding that uncertainty is unavoidable, growth is uncomfortable, and staying the same is also a risk. Once your brain learns this, everything shifts. You stop asking, "What's the safest choice?" You start asking, "What's the most aligned choice?" You stop waiting for certainty. You start building capacity. You stop interpreting fear as a warning. You start interpreting it as a signal of expansion, and slowly, your brain rewires itself. It begins to associate action with empowerment instead of danger. It learns that discomfort doesn't kill you, it teaches you. In the next part, we're going to dive into how repetition, emotion, and environment work together to either lock you into limitation or propel you into success. This is where brain training becomes practical, measurable, and transformational. Once you understand this mechanism, you'll stop relying on motivation and start building momentum that lasts. Topic 3. How your brain is rewired by repetition, emotion, and environment. Whether you like it or not. Your brain is not shaped by your goals. It is shaped by what you repeat, what you feel, and what surrounds you. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths about success, because it removes excuses and replaces them with responsibility. You can want abundance, confidence, and freedom with all your heart. But if your daily repetitions, emotional states, and environment contradict those desires, your brain will follow the strongest signal. And the strongest signal is almost never intention. It is experience. Repetition is the language the brain understands best. Every thought you think repeatedly becomes familiar. Every behavior you repeat becomes efficient. Every emotional reaction you rehearse becomes automatic. This is not philosophy. This is how neural pathways are formed. The brain is constantly asking one question: what should I automate? And it automates whatever you do most often, not what you say you value. This is why someone can attend seminars, read books, watch motivational content, and still feel unchanged. Their brain receives inspiration for an hour, then returns to the same repetitions for the other 23. The math is simple. The old programming wins. Emotion is the amplifier. The brain does not remember neutral experiences very well. It remembers what carries emotional charge: stress, fear, excitement, shame, pride, relief. These emotions act like highlighters. They tell the brain, "This matters. Save this pattern." If you repeatedly experience money decisions with anxiety, pressure, or guilt, your brain links money with emotional threat. If you repeatedly experience success attempts with stress and self-criticism, your brain links growth with pain. Over time, it learns to avoid what hurts, even if that avoidance keeps you small. This is why willpower is unreliable. You can push yourself for a while, but if your emotional association with growth is negative, your brain will eventually resist. It will create fatigue, distraction, and doubt to pull you back to emotional safety. Now here's where environment quietly completes the loop. Your environment is not just physical space. It is people, conversations, media, habits, and expectations. The brain is highly social and highly adaptive. It absorbs norms automatically. What feels normal becomes acceptable. What becomes acceptable becomes invisible. If you are surrounded by people who complain, justify, and settle, your brain treats limitation as reality. If your environment normalizes stress, burnout, and survival thinking, your brain adjusts its expectations downward. It stops reaching because reaching feels abnormal. This is why environment often beats intelligence. Two equally capable people placed in different environments will develop radically different identities over time. Look at someone like Tony Robbins. Long before global success, he intentionally changed his environment. He immersed himself in mentors, ideas, and conversations that expanded what felt possible. His brain adapted to that standard. It learned that growth, intensity, and contribution were normal. That normalization changed his behavior without constant effort. The same principle applies in business. Companies like Google and Apple invest heavily in culture not as a luxury, but as a performance strategy. They understand that environment trains behavior. When innovation, responsibility, and excellence are normal, the brain doesn't resist them. It adopts them. Most people underestimate this. They try to change themselves without changing what constantly reinforces their old patterns. They want a new future while bathing daily in reminders of the past. And here is the critical insight. Your brain does not differentiate between a thought you consciously choose and one you passively absorb. Repetition through exposure works either way. This means that every conversation you tolerate, every piece of content you consume, every routine you keep is either training your brain toward expansion or contraction. This is not about cutting off the world or living in a bubble. It is about becoming deliberate. When repetition, emotion, and environment align, change becomes natural. You don't need to force discipline. You don't need constant motivation. The brain begins to move in the direction it has been trained to recognize as normal. This is how habits stick. This is how confidence grows. This is how identity shifts. Think about how elite athletes train. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. Repetition creates muscle memory. Emotion creates intensity. Environment creates standards. The brain adapts to meet those standards automatically. Success operates the same way. If you want to train your brain for abundance, repetition must reflect abundance. That means repeated exposure to constructive thinking, learning, and action. Emotion must be reframed so growth is associated with pride, curiosity, and meaning rather than fear. Environment must support expansion, even if that means uncomfortable changes. This is why many people experience breakthroughs when they change cities, social circles, or routines. It's not magic, it's neural adaptation. The brain is responding to a new normal. But here's the empowering part. You don't need to wait for external change. You can begin internally. You can choose what you repeat. You can choose what you emotionally reinforce. You can choose what environments you allow to shape you. And when you do, the brain follows. At first, it will resist. Familiar patterns will fight to survive. Doubt will arise. Discomfort will appear. This is not failure. This is rewiring in progress. Over time, something remarkable happens. The effort decreases. The resistance fades. The new identity begins to feel natural. This is the moment people describe as confidence or alignment or clarity. In reality, it is neurological efficiency. The brain has accepted a new operating system. In the next topic, we are going to take this understanding and apply it directly to wealth creation, decision-making, and long-term success. You'll see how high performers use brain training not just to feel better, but to make better choices under pressure, uncertainty, and risk. Once you understand this, success stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like a skill you can train. Topic 4. How high performers train their brains to make powerful decisions under pressure. At some point, success stops being about knowing what to do and becomes about deciding when it matters most. This is where most people fall apart. Not because they lack information, but because pressure exposes how their brain has been trained to respond to uncertainty. Your brain reveals its true conditioning not when things are calm, but when stakes are high. Think about moments that shape outcomes: negotiating a salary, investing money, starting a business, walking away from comfort, speaking up when it would be easier to stay quiet. In those moments, logic alone does not drive behavior. Training does. High performers don't have fewer fears. They have trained their brains to function while fear is present. The average brain, when under pressure, seeks relief. It wants to reduce discomfort immediately. It looks for certainty, approval, or escape. That's why people rush decisions, avoid confrontation, underprice themselves, or abandon plans the moment anxiety rises. The brain is not trying to ruin their future. It's trying to calm the nervous system. High performers train their brains differently. They condition themselves to pause instead of react. They delay emotional relief in exchange for strategic clarity. This is not personality. It is learned response. Look at someone like Ray Dalio. In moments of financial chaos, when markets panic and emotions dominate, his edge is not intelligence alone. It is emotional regulation. He trained his brain to observe reality without becoming overwhelmed by it. He learned to separate signal from noise, emotion from information. That ability alone compounded into billions. Or think about leaders who navigate crises successfully. They are not immune to stress, but they have trained their brains to stay grounded while others spiral. Their nervous systems don't hijack their thinking. Their decisions remain aligned with long-term vision instead of short-term relief. This is what most people misunderstand about confidence. Confidence is not loudness or certainty. Confidence is the ability to stay present when outcomes are unclear. Your brain can be trained for this, but first you must understand why pressure feels so overwhelming to begin with. Pressure is not caused by the situation itself. It is caused by the meaning your brain assigns to the situation. If a decision feels like a threat to your identity, your worth, or your security, your brain will react as if survival is at stake. That reaction narrows focus. It reduces creativity. It pushes you toward familiar patterns. This is why people under pressure often make conservative, self-protective choices that feel safe but limit growth. High performers train their brains to change the meaning of pressure. Instead of interpreting it as danger, they interpret it as responsibility. Instead of seeing uncertainty as a risk, they see it as a field of possibility. This shift is subtle, but powerful. Think about how experienced entrepreneurs view risk. What terrifies beginners feels manageable to them, not because the risk disappeared, but because their brains have been trained through repeated exposure. They've learned that discomfort does not equal disaster. They've learned that mistakes are information, not identity. This training happens through deliberate experience. High performers put themselves in situations that stretch them, then reflect instead of retreat. They don't numb stress with distraction. They process it. They extract lessons. Over time, the brain recalibrates. This is why avoidance is so costly. Every time you avoid a difficult decision, your brain learns that avoidance works. It rewards you with relief, and relief is addictive. But the price is paid later, in stagnation. High performers reverse that conditioning. They reward themselves for courage, not comfort. The reward may not be immediate pleasure, but it is long-term self-trust, and self-trust is the foundation of decisive action. Another critical difference lies in how high performers train their attention. Under pressure, the untrained brain fixates on what could go wrong. The trained brain scans for leverage. What can I control? What matters most right now? What decision creates optionality? This is not optimism, it is focus. Warren Buffett is known for saying that the most important quality for an investor is temperament, not intellect. Temperament is emotional training. It is the ability to stay rational when others are emotional, to stay patient when others rush. That temperament was not gifted to him. It was built. The same applies to wealth creation, leadership, and influence. The brain that panics under pressure cannot think strategically. The brain that has been trained to stay calm can see opportunities others miss. And here's the most empowering part. This training does not require extreme circumstances. It begins with small decisions made consciously, finishing what you start even when motivation fades, speaking honestly instead of seeking approval, choosing long-term alignment over short-term comfort. Each time you do this, your brain updates its model of reality. It learns, I can handle this. That belief becomes automatic. Over time, pressure loses its grip. Decisions become cleaner. Action becomes more consistent. You stop outsourcing your power to mood, fear, or external validation. This is when people say things like, everything started to click, or I just felt more grounded. In reality, their brain stopped overreacting and started responding. In the next topic, we're going to go even deeper into how identity is formed and how your brain uses identity to determine what feels possible, deserved, or off-limits. This is where lasting success is either unlocked or permanently blocked. Once you understand how identity training works, you'll see why some people rise again and again, even after failure, while others quit at the first sign of resistance. Topic 5. Identity training. Why your brain only allows the success you believe you are. There is a silent rule running your life that most people never question. Your brain will never allow you to consistently act beyond the identity you believe is yours. You can set goals that sound ambitious. You can feel inspired for moments or even weeks. But sooner or later, your behavior will snap back to what feels familiar, deserved, and believable. That snapback is not a lack of discipline. It is identity enforcement. Your brain's primary job is coherence. It wants your thoughts, actions, emotions, and self-image to match. When they don't, it creates discomfort. And it will always resolve that discomfort by changing behavior before changing identity. This is why people sabotage success right after progress. They get close to a breakthrough, then procrastinate, self-doubt, pick a fight, lose focus, or suddenly get busy. On the surface, it looks irrational. Underneath, the brain is protecting identity. If you see yourself as someone who struggles financially, sudden abundance feels unsafe. If you see yourself as someone who plays small, visibility feels threatening. If you see yourself as someone who tries but never quite wins, winning feels foreign. So, the brain pulls you back. This is why affirmations fail when identity is untouched. You can repeat, I am successful all day. But if your deeper identity says, people like me don't get ahead, the brain treats the affirmation as noise. It will default to the stronger program. Identity is not what you consciously say you are. It is what your brain expects you to be. And those expectations were trained, not chosen. They came from early experiences, repeated emotional moments, feedback from authority figures, cultural messages, and personal history. Over time, your brain built a story about who you are, what is realistic for you, and what level of success feels acceptable. That story becomes a boundary. Think about how people talk about themselves casually. I'm just not good with money. I'm not the confident type. I'm more of a behind-the-scenes person. These sound harmless, but to the brain, they are instructions. Each repetition strengthens the identity. Each emotional agreement locks it in deeper. High performers understand this, even if they don't articulate it in neuroscience terms. They know that lasting success requires an identity upgrade, not just better tactics. Look at someone like Cristiano Ronaldo. His work ethic, discipline, and performance are legendary, but what truly separates him is identity. He doesn't see himself as someone who hopes to win. He sees himself as someone who is expected to perform at the highest level. That expectation shapes his daily decisions automatically. Training hard is not heroic for him. It is normal. Or think about entrepreneurs who bounce back after failure. To the outside world, they look resilient. Internally, their identity does not equate failure with being flawed. Their brain interprets setbacks as part of the role they play, so they recover faster. Contrast this with someone whose identity is tied to being the smart one or the responsible one. Failure feels like a threat to who they are, so they avoid risks that could challenge that identity, even if those risks lead to growth. Your brain is always asking, what would someone like me do? And then it answers the question automatically. This is why training identity is the most powerful form of brain training. When identity changes, Behavior follows without force, but identity does not change through wishing. It changes through evidence. Your brain updates identity based on consistent proof, small actions repeated over time that contradict the old story. Not dramatic leaps, but deliberate signals. Each time you do something that aligns with the next version of yourself, the brain takes note. Each time you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, identity shifts slightly. Each time you act in spite of fear, the brain recalibrates what kind of person you are. This is why high performers obsess over standards, not motivation. Standards define identity. If your standard is, "I do what's easy when I'm tired," your identity becomes someone who negotiates with discomfort. If your standard is, "I do what I said I would do," your identity becomes someone reliable to themselves. Wealthy individuals often have non-negotiable standards around learning, decision-making, and time. Those standards reinforce identity daily. Over years, that identity compounds into results. And here's the crucial insight most people miss. Your brain believes what you demonstrate, not what you declare. This means you cannot think your way into a new identity. You must behave your way into it. But behavior alone is not enough. Emotion must be involved. The brain encodes identity through emotionally charged moments. Moments when you choose differently, moments when you don't escape discomfort, moments when you act with integrity under pressure. Those moments matter more than months of routine. This is why transformation often feels intense. Identity shifts require emotional engagement. The brain must feel, "This is who I am now." And once that happens, everything simplifies. You stop forcing habits. You stop fighting procrastination. You stop relying on motivation. Action becomes congruent. This is also why environments matter so much. If your environment constantly reinforces an old identity, change becomes exhausting. Your brain is receiving conflicting signals. One step forward, one step back. High performers curate environments that support their identity. They surround themselves with people, information, and expectations that reflect who they are becoming, not who they were. This is not arrogance. It is alignment. If you want to train your brain for success, you must ask yourself a different question. Not "what do I want?" but "who must I become?" And then, what would that person do today? At first, it will feel unnatural. That's a good sign. It means you're stretching identity. Over time, the unfamiliar becomes normal. The brain adapts. The new identity stabilizes. This is when people say success feels lighter, less forced, more natural, because it is no longer something you chase, it is something you express. In the next topic, we're going to connect identity training directly to wealth, abundance, and opportunity recognition. You'll see how your brain filters reality based on who you believe you are, and why two people can see the same opportunity and experience completely different outcomes. Once you understand this filter, you'll stop wondering why success feels out of reach and start recognizing where it has been hiding all along. Topic 6. How your brain filters reality and decides what opportunities you're allowed to see. There is an invisible filter operating in your mind at all times, and it determines far more than most people realize. It decides what you notice, what you ignore, what feels possible, and what never even enters your awareness. This filter is not luck. It is not intelligence. It is identity in action. Your brain does not show you reality as it is. It shows you reality as it believes it should be. Every second, you are surrounded by opportunities, ideas, connections, and signals. But your brain can only process a tiny fraction of them, so it filters. It asks, "What is relevant to someone like me?" And then it deletes the rest. This is why two people can walk into the same room, attend the same event, work at the same company, or live in the same economy, and experience completely different realities. One sees possibilities, the other sees obstacles. One notices leverage, the other notices limitations. The difference is not external, it is neurological. Your brain's filtering system is designed to conserve energy and protect identity. It highlights information that confirms who you believe you are and minimizes information that challenges that belief. If you see yourself as someone who struggles financially, your brain will notice bills, risks, and reasons to be cautious. If you see yourself as someone who creates value, your brain will notice gaps, inefficiencies, and unmet needs. If you see yourself as someone who is lucky to be included, your brain will miss chances to lead. If you see yourself as someone who belongs at the table, your brain will look for influence. This is not optimism or pessimism. It is pattern recognition shaped by identity. This is why abundance is often misunderstood. People think abundance is about having more. In reality, abundance begins with perceiving more, and perception is a trained skill. Look at how wealthy individuals think about money. When they receive income, their brain immediately asks, "How can this grow?" When they face a problem, their brain asks, "How can this be leveraged?" Their identity filters reality through expansion. Meanwhile, someone with a scarcity-trained brain receives income and asks, "How long will this last?" They face a problem and ask, "How do I avoid loss?" Same situation, different filters, different outcomes. Consider someone like Richard Branson. His success did not come from mastering one industry. It came from how his brain interpreted opportunity. Where others saw risk, he saw brand leverage. Where others saw complexity, he saw collaboration. His identity as an explorer and creator trained his brain to notice opportunity where others felt overwhelmed. The brain is constantly matching external information with internal identity. When there is alignment, opportunity feels obvious. When there is misalignment, opportunity feels invisible or threatening. This is why people often say, "I just don't see the opportunities," without realizing that seeing is not passive. It is conditioned. Your brain will not show you what you don't believe you're allowed to have. This is also why sudden success can feel disorienting. When opportunity exceeds identity, the brain experiences conflict. It may downplay the opportunity, delay action, or create reasons to retreat. Not because the opportunity isn't real, but because it doesn't fit the current self-image. High performers train their brains to expand this filter deliberately. They expose themselves to new standards of living, thinking, and earning. Not to feel inferior, but to normalize expansion. When something becomes normal, the brain stops resisting it. This is why mentorship is so powerful. Being around people who operate at a higher level recalibrates your filter. Your brain starts to notice what they notice. It begins to ask different questions. It expands what feels possible. The same applies to companies. Organizations that grow rapidly train their teams to see opportunity everywhere. They reward initiative. They encourage problem solving. Over time, employees stop waiting for instructions and start spotting value proactively. That shift is neurological before it is strategic. Now here's the critical insight. You don't need external permission to change your filter. You can begin internally by changing what you repeatedly focus on. Attention is training. What you dwell on teaches your brain what matters. If you constantly consume content that reinforces fear, limitation, and outrage, your brain becomes excellent at detecting threats. If you consume content that highlights innovation, growth, and possibility, your brain becomes skilled at recognizing opportunity. This is not about ignoring reality. It is about training relevance. Your brain has limited bandwidth. What you feed it determines what it prioritizes. This also explains why gratitude practices, when done correctly, work. They are not about pretending everything is fine. They train the brain to notice what is working. Over time, this shifts the filter from lack to sufficiency, from survival to creation. And once your brain starts noticing opportunity, behavior changes naturally. You speak differently. You ask better questions. You take action sooner. You position yourself where value flows. People often think opportunity comes from outside. In truth, it is revealed from within. This is why wealth is rarely accidental. It is built by brains trained to see, evaluate, and act on opportunity consistently. And here's the empowering truth. Your filter is not fixed. It updates with experience. Every time you act in alignment with growth, your brain records evidence. Every time you step into a room that once intimidated you, your filter expands. Every time you solve a problem instead of avoiding it, your brain recalibrates what you are capable of. Over time, opportunities that once felt invisible become obvious. Conversations change, choices change, results change. In the next topic, we are going to bring all of this together and show how disciplined daily mental practices quietly compound into extraordinary success over time. You'll see how small, consistent training rewires your brain at a level that no single breakthrough ever could. This is where success stops feeling like chance and starts feeling inevitable. Topic 7. the daily mental training that quietly compounds into extraordinary success. What most people misunderstand about success is that it rarely comes from dramatic breakthroughs. It comes from quiet, almost invisible training that happens every single day. Not in moments of inspiration, but in moments of choice. Not when life is calm, but when it is repetitive, mundane, and slightly uncomfortable. Your brain is not transformed by intensity alone. It is transformed by consistency. High performers know this. They don't rely on motivation because motivation is emotional and temporary. They rely on daily mental training that compounds over time, just like interest in a well-managed investment. Think about how wealth actually grows. Rarely through one lucky moment, mostly through disciplined decisions made repeatedly, even when the results are not immediately visible. The brain works the same way. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition. Identity stabilizes through daily reinforcement. Confidence emerges through proof accumulated over time. This is why people who chase constant inspiration often feel stuck. Inspiration spikes emotion, but doesn't always change behavior. And without behavior, the brain has no reason to update its beliefs. High performers train their brains in small ways that feel almost insignificant in the moment. They choose focus when distraction is easier. They complete tasks when quitting would bring relief. They reflect instead of react. They decide deliberately instead of impulsively. These moments don't look heroic, but they are decisive. Every time you do what aligns with your future instead of your mood, your brain learns something powerful. I am someone who follows through. That lesson compounds. This is how discipline becomes identity rather than effort. Consider someone like Bill Gates. People admire his intelligence, but what truly set him apart early on was obsessive daily learning. While others relaxed, he read. While others consumed entertainment, he consumed information. Over years, that daily habit trained his brain to think systemically, strategically, and long-term. The results were not immediate, but they were inevitable. The same pattern appears across successful people in every field. Athletes train fundamentals daily, leaders reflect daily, investors review decisions daily, not because they enjoy repetition, but because repetition rewires. Your brain does not need massive change. It needs consistent signals. One of the most powerful forms of daily training is how you start and end your day. The brain is most receptive during transitions. What you feed it in those moments matters disproportionately. If you begin your day in reaction, scrolling, comparing, absorbing chaos, you train your brain to be reactive. If you begin your day with intention, clarity, and focus, you train your brain to lead. The same applies at night. Reflection reinforces learning. Distraction erases it. High performers often review their day not to judge themselves, but to extract lessons. This simple practice trains the brain to see life as feedback instead of failure. Another quiet but critical form of daily training is language. Not motivational slogans, but internal dialogue. The words you use to interpret experience shape emotional response. Emotional response shapes memory. Memory shapes identity. When something goes wrong, do you say, "I always mess this up," or "What can this teach me?" To the brain, these are not just thoughts. They are commands. Over time, the brain becomes fluent in the language you use most. Speak the language of limitation, and it becomes your default. Speak the language of growth, and your brain begins to search for solutions automatically. This is why daily journaling, when done intentionally, is so effective. It slows thinking. It makes patterns visible. It trains the brain to organize experience instead of being overwhelmed by it. Environment also plays a role here. High performers reduce friction for good behavior and increase friction for bad habits. They make focus easier and distraction harder. They understand that willpower is finite, but environment is persistent. This is not about perfection, it's about direction. Even 5 minutes of intentional mental training daily compounds. Just like a small investment made consistently can outperform a large one made sporadically, small daily habits outperform intense but inconsistent effort. What makes this so powerful is that your brain does not distinguish between small and big actions. It only distinguishes between repeated and unrepeated ones. Repetition is truth to the brain. This is why people often wake up one day and say, "Something shifted." From the outside, it looks sudden. Internally, it was the result of months or years of quiet conditioning. And here's the most encouraging part. You don't need to do everything at once. You only need to start reinforcing the identity you want to become. One aligned decision today. One moment of awareness instead of autopilot. One small promise kept. Each one trains your brain. Over time, resistance fades, clarity increases, action feels lighter. Not because life got easier, but because your brain got stronger. This is how success becomes sustainable. Not through force, but through training. In the next topic, we are going to address the internal resistance that often appears right when people begin this process. The doubts, the fatigue, the urge to quit. You'll learn why resistance is not a sign you're doing something wrong, but proof that rewiring is happening. Once you understand this, you'll stop interpreting resistance as failure and start using it as confirmation. Topic 8. Why resistance, doubt, and fatigue are signs. Your brain is actually changing. One of the biggest reasons people abandon their growth process is because they misinterpret resistance. They feel doubt rising, motivation dropping, fatigue setting in, and they assume something is wrong. They think they're failing. In reality, these sensations often mean the opposite. They mean your brain is changing. Your brain is designed to protect the familiar. When you begin to think differently, act differently, or hold yourself to a higher standard, you are threatening old neural patterns. And those patterns don't disappear quietly. They push back. Resistance is not a warning sign. It is a transition signal. Think of resistance as the brain's immune response to change. Old habits, beliefs, and identities have kept you safe in the past. They may not have made you successful, but they were predictable. When you challenge them, your brain reacts with doubt, distraction, tiredness, and emotional noise, not to stop you from succeeding, but to pull you back into what it knows. This is why resistance often appears right when things start working. You commit to a new routine, and suddenly you feel exhausted. You gain clarity about your future, and suddenly doubt floods in. You begin making progress, and suddenly old distractions feel irresistible. This is not coincidence. It is neurological recalibration. Your brain is testing whether this new direction is temporary or permanent. If you retreat at the first sign of discomfort, it learns a clear lesson. Growth is unsafe. If you stay steady, even imperfectly, it learns something far more powerful. This is the new normal. High performers understand this. They don't interpret resistance as a signal to stop. They interpret it as confirmation that they are leaving the familiar. Think about anyone who has achieved significant success. Entrepreneurs, athletes, leaders, artists. Every single one faced moments where quitting felt logical, fatigue felt convincing, doubt felt intelligent. What separated them was not the absence of resistance, but their relationship with it. They didn't argue with resistance. They didn't dramatize it. They didn't obey it. They expected it. Look at someone like J.K. Rowling. Writing Harry Potter was not a smooth, inspired journey. It was filled with rejection, financial stress, and self-doubt. But her identity as a writer was not dependent on external validation. When resistance appeared, she didn't interpret it as proof she was wrong. She interpreted it as part of the process. The same pattern exists in business. Many founders report that the moment before a major breakthrough feels heavier than usual. Energy dips, focus wavers, old fears resurface. This is not failure. It is the brain shedding outdated wiring. Fatigue, in particular, is misunderstood. Sometimes fatigue is physical and requires rest, but often it is neurological. Your brain is using more energy because it is operating differently. New habits, new thinking, new identity require more conscious processing. The brain hasn't automated them yet. This phase feels heavy, but it is temporary. Once new patterns stabilize, effort decreases dramatically. What once required discipline becomes natural. What once felt uncomfortable becomes normal. This is why people often say, "I don't know why, but things feel easier now." In reality, their brain has completed a rewiring cycle. Doubt works the same way. Doubt is not proof you lack belief. It is proof your brain is questioning old assumptions. When identity shifts, uncertainty rises. The brain asks, "Who am I now?" That question feels unsettling, but it is necessary. People who quit at this stage don't fail because they are weak. They fail because they mislabel growth sensations as danger. High performers train themselves to recognize these signals accurately. When doubt appears, they slow down instead of stopping. When fatigue appears, they simplify instead of quitting. When resistance appears, they stay consistent instead of seeking comfort. This is emotional maturity. Another critical point: resistance often uses familiar voices. It sounds like your own thoughts. It feels rational. It says things like, maybe later, you're pushing too hard, this isn't really you, or what's the rush? These thoughts feel reasonable because they are based on old identity trying to survive. The key is not to eliminate these thoughts, but to stop obeying them automatically. You don't need to feel confident to act. You don't need certainty to continue. You don't need motivation to stay consistent. You only need commitment to the process. This is why systems outperform willpower. Systems allow you to act even when emotions fluctuate. High performers rely on structure during resistance, not inspiration. They lower the bar, but don't break the chain. They show up imperfectly rather than disappearing. They understand that consistency through resistance is what trains the brain most effectively. And here's the most important reframe: resistance is temporary, but the identity you're building is permanent. Every time you move forward despite resistance, your brain records a powerful message: I can do hard things. That message reshapes future behavior. Over time, resistance loses intensity because the brain no longer sees growth as a threat. This is how courage is built, not through fearlessness, but through familiarity with fear. The people who create extraordinary success are not those who feel good all the time. They are those who learned to continue when things felt unclear. In the next topic, we're going to bring everything together and show how long-term success, wealth, and fulfillment emerge when brain training becomes a way of life rather than a temporary project. This is where effort gives way to alignment and success becomes self-sustaining. Topic 9. When brain training becomes a lifestyle, success stops being a struggle. There is a moment in every real transformation when effort quietly gives way to alignment. At first, training your brain for success feels intentional, even demanding. You have to remind yourself. You have to catch old patterns. You have to choose differently again and again. But over time, something subtle and powerful happens. The struggle fades, not because life becomes easy, but because your brain is no longer fighting you. This is the point where success stops feeling like something you chase and starts feeling like something you live. Most people never reach this stage because they treat growth as a temporary project. They try to fix themselves for a few weeks, hoping for permanent results. But the brain doesn't work that way. The brain stabilizes around what is consistent, not what is intense. High performers understand this deeply. They don't ask, "How do I stay motivated?" They ask, "How do I live in a way that supports who I'm becoming?" That shift changes everything. When brain training becomes a lifestyle, decisions simplify. You no longer debate every action. You don't negotiate with your standards. You don't rely on emotion to tell you who to be today. Your identity is clear, and your brain is organized around it. This is why successful people often appear calm under pressure. Their brains are not constantly switching modes. They are not torn between who they want to be and who they've trained themselves to be. There is coherence. Think about how long-term wealth is built. The wealthy don't wake up every morning excited about discipline. They simply live in a way that makes wealth the natural byproduct. Their spending aligns with their values. Their learning is habitual. Their decisions are filtered through long-term thinking. This is not sacrifice, it is structure. When brain training becomes lifestyle, your nervous system changes. You stop oscillating between extremes of effort and exhaustion. You stop burning out and starting over. Instead, you move steadily, calmly, reliably. This is why many people who truly succeed describe a sense of peace alongside achievement. Their brains are no longer at war with their goals. Another powerful shift happens here. You stop needing external validation to stay on course. Early on, encouragement feels necessary. Praise feels motivating. But as identity stabilizes, approval becomes optional. Your brain has internalized standards. This is freedom. It also changes how you experience setbacks. When success is a lifestyle, failure is no longer personal. It's informational. You adjust without drama. You learn without shame. You continue without losing momentum. This is why people who reach this stage recover faster than others. They don't spiral. Their brains are trained to interpret challenges as part of the process, not proof of inadequacy. Look at someone like Warren Buffett again. decades of consistency didn't come from willpower alone. They came from a lifestyle built around reading, thinking, patience, and discipline. Those behaviors became normal. His brain no longer resisted them. The same is true for leaders who maintain excellence over decades. They don't rely on bursts of effort. They rely on alignment between values, identity, and environment. This is also where fulfillment enters the picture. When your brain is trained for success, but your lifestyle contradicts your values, you feel empty. When your brain training and lifestyle align, success feels meaningful. This is an often overlooked truth. Fulfillment is neurological harmony. It happens when your thoughts, actions, and identity are no longer in conflict. Many people chase success, but sabotage fulfillment because their lifestyle doesn't support who they are becoming. They achieve externally while fighting internally. That tension eventually leads to burnout. High performers avoid this by designing life intentionally. They choose rhythms, routines, and environments that support their brain training. They protect their energy. They simplify decisions. They eliminate unnecessary friction. This is not rigidity. It is elegance. And here's the most empowering realization of all. Once success becomes a lifestyle, it becomes self-sustaining. You no longer need to force growth. Growth becomes the default response. Opportunities feel easier to recognize. Decisions feel clearer. Confidence feels quieter, but stronger. You trust yourself because you've built evidence over time. This is why the most dangerous myth is that success is about doing more. In reality, it's about being consistent with who you've trained yourself to be. And this brings us to a profound shift in how you see time. Early in the journey, time feels urgent. You want results now. You feel behind. But as brain training stabilizes, time becomes an ally. You trust the process. You understand compounding. You stop rushing. You stop forcing. You stop comparing. You focus on alignment. And alignment is powerful, because when your brain, behavior, and environment are aligned, success is no longer fragile. It doesn't depend on mood. It doesn't collapse under stress. It doesn't disappear when motivation dips. It endures. In the final topic, we're going to bring everything together in a way that anchors this knowledge deeply, not as theory, but as a lived truth. You'll see how to step forward from this moment with clarity, intention, and confidence, knowing that success is no longer something you hope for, but something you are actively training every day. Topic 10. The moment you realize success was never missing, only untrained. There comes a moment, quiet, almost subtle, when everything you've learned finally clicks into place. Not as motivation, not as excitement, but as clarity. And in that moment, you realize something deeply liberating and slightly unsettling at the same time. Success was never missing from your life. It was never hiding from you. It was never reserved for other people. It was simply waiting for your brain to be trained to receive it. Most people spend their lives searching outward. They look for the right opportunity, the right timing, the right strategy, the right permission. They assume success is something external that must arrive someday. But the truth you now understand is far more powerful. Success is an internal state before it is ever an external result. Your brain decides what feels possible long before reality responds. This is why so many people say, "I had the chance, but I wasn't ready," without realizing that readiness is neurological. It is not about intelligence. It is about conditioning. Until your brain is trained to tolerate growth, responsibility, uncertainty, and visibility, success will feel uncomfortable, even threatening. And the brain will always reject what feels unsafe. But now, something has changed. You no longer see resistance as a stop sign. You no longer confuse comfort with truth. You no longer wait for confidence before action. You understand that confidence is built through action. That clarity comes from movement. That identity is shaped by evidence. This realization is the turning point. Because once you see how the brain works, you stop fighting yourself. You stop using force. You stop relying on emotion. Instead, you begin to train deliberately. You understand that every day is a vote. Every decision, every thought you reinforce, every habit you repeat is shaping the person you are becoming. And this is not overwhelming. It is empowering. Because it means no single moment defines you. Consistency does. This is why true success is quiet at first. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand validation. It grows beneath the surface in how you think, how you choose, how you respond under pressure. Long before the results show up, the internal shift has already happened. And when results finally arrive, they don't feel shocking. They feel earned, familiar, aligned. This is also why some people collapse when they reach success. Their external results outpace their internal training. Their brain hasn't adapted. The pressure overwhelms them. They self-sabotage. They retreat. But that won't be your story, because you are training from the inside out. You now understand that wealth is not just money. It is capacity. It is the ability to handle complexity, responsibility, and opportunity without losing yourself. Prosperity is not accumulation. It is expansion with stability. And this is why the most successful people in the world are not chasing more. They are refining alignment. Think about someone who has sustained success over decades. They are not frantic. They are not desperate. They are not proving themselves. Their brain is trained to operate from clarity rather than fear, from intention rather than reaction. That is the real goal. You no longer need to ask, "Can I do this?" The better question is, who am I training myself to be? Because once identity and behavior align, success becomes inevitable. From this point forward, every challenge becomes feedback. Every delay becomes information. Every obstacle becomes a training ground. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is personal. Everything is usable. This is the mindset that builds empires, movements, legacies, not overnight, but inevitably. And here's the most powerful truth of all. You don't need to change your entire life today. You only need to stop reinforcing the old one. One conscious choice, one moment of awareness, one action that aligns with the person you are becoming. Your brain will do the rest. It will adapt. It will recalibrate. It will expand. And one day, not far from now, you will look back and realize that the person who once struggled, hesitated, and doubted is no longer who you are. Not because you forced change, but because you trained for it. Success will no longer feel like something you chase. It will feel like something you express. And that is the moment you truly win. If this video shifted the way you see success, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Success and Prosperity Code to keep training your mind for wealth, clarity, and purpose. Like this video so this message reaches others who are ready to grow. Comment below with the one idea that changed how you think today. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because success is not luck. It's training.